Okay, so the next item we're going to hear, because we moved the agenda around, is item N6, and this is a discussion and possible action regarding city participation in a community choice aggregation energy purchase program. We heard this item previously. We had a vote, and it was really just a mistake. It had actually passed. However, we concluded that it hadn't, so we're hearing this again. You've got two new council members and a new mayor up here, so landscape's a little different, and I'm sure we're going to hear all the same arguments, and hopefully we'll better understand what these voting results mean when we have one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ted Simon.
Thank you, Mayor Brand and City Council members. I am here tonight to provide you that status report on the possibility of the city joining the Community Choice Aggregation Energy Purchase Program. As you said, we were here on March 21st, so if we're repetitive, please accept our apologies, but we do know we've got a couple of new council members, so this would be great. In the background, back in 2014, the city was approached by the South Bay Clean Power Working Group about an idea of joining other South Bay cities and forming an entity to purchase and sell energy that all users within the combined jurisdictions. On January the 20th of 2015, the Council adopted a resolution to authorize the city's participation in the feasibility study for such an entity. Over the past 2 years, the South Bay Clean Power Group, with Councilman Horvath participating, has developed a draft Joint Powers Authority and business plan for the South Bay CCA program. So let's step back for a minute and define it. What is a community choice aggregation? It's when local government agencies form an organization for the purpose of purchasing energy in the wholesale power market and providing it to customers as an alternative to traditional investor-owned utilities, such as Southern California Edison. Existing CCAs in California have been able to provide higher levels of renewable energy at lower prices, typically in the 4 to 5% range, than the investor-owned utilities such as SCE. There are several primary goals of a CCA program. On the environmental side, they stimulate greater use of clean, renewable energy, which results in reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Financial benefits include providing stable, competitive rates to customers that aren't subject to future Edison rate increases. CCAs also provide energy customers with multiple rate options, depending on their desire to support renewable energy use. The proposed CCA for the South Bay includes up to 14 participating cities, including Torrance, Hermosa, Manhattan Beach, Carson, and Santa Monica, as an example. Customers would be provided with a choice of energy rates based on 33%, 50%, and 75% renewable energy use. The CCA would be governed by a board of directors comprised of one member representing each city. Decisions would be made using a weighted voting system based on a statistic such as total energy load or population. The specific financial and staffing impacts resulting from the city's participation are not known at this time. It is anticipated that monetary and staffing commitments will be required during the formation of the CCA. Once it is operational, all costs should be covered by the program revenues themselves. We are joined tonight by Mr. Joe Galliani, who was here before. He's the acting chair of the South Bay Clean Power Advisory Committee. We're also joined tonight by Gero of LA County. He is the chief sustainability officer for the county. Joe has got some of the slide presentation materials that we presented to you last time, and he'll be followed by Gary with a verbal presentation on what's happening at the county level. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Ted. I just want to say, first off, congratulations, Mr. Mayor, new council members. It's a pleasure to be here at this meeting. I will try to be brief. I know some of you have already heard this. Councilwoman Barbie, I know that you weren't able to be with us last time either, so I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our program. And let me start with one of the key points of difference between our program and any others in LA County, and that is that we started with our goals and objectives, and we think that's really important in a community choice choice aggregation program to know what it is that you want to achieve. And what we'd like to achieve are what we call the 6 commandments. We started with these and shaped them over the 3 years that we've been doing this. And it starts with our desire to get to 100% renewable power as quickly as possible. And we want to do that without using paper. And by that I mean we don't want to buy unbundled Category 3 RECs, renewable energy certificates, that were detached from the original renewable project that they once were generated by and then sold to other entities so that they can claim credit for that renewable power. We don't want to paper this program. We want all the renewable power in a South Bay Clean Power program to be legitimate and produced in California. We also are focused very heavily on local jobs, local investment, and local power generation. You can do a CCA program and buy your power from the desert at the cheapest possible rates and send it over high transmission lines to substations and to us here, but there are no jobs in that, and we don't get the resiliency and the homeland security that we would get from building out our infrastructure locally. We would like to be able to operate our local grid even when the big grid goes down, and that's what distributed energy resources are all about. We want to generate power and maximize the renewable energy power that we generate here on every rooftop that's viable and every parking lot that is appropriate for this. We want to take advantage of the great sun that we get here in Southern California. There's a reason we're called the Golden State. We also have partnered very closely, and it's unique in our particular program, with labor. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers are the folks that are going to be doing these big infrastructure projects. And we went to them at the very beginning of our initiative and said, let's work together and let's create this program from scratch together. And that's very unusual. In Northern California, they've had difficulty partnering together with labor. We have not had that problem. We also want to have project labor agreements as part of this, community benefit agreements, job training, job apprenticeship programs. The IBW 11, the local union, has an electrical training institute out in the City of Commerce. It's a net zero plus energy building, and they have a 5-year apprenticeship program that doesn't cost the students anything. They need a high school diploma. And they need to be able to pass the math test. But if they do, they are then put on a pathway to a career, not just a job, but a journeyman electrician's career that can take them anywhere. We would love to give that opportunity to our local folks here in the South Bay and on the West Side. And then finally, we're focused on environmental justice. Here in the South Bay, you know, we have some beautiful beach cities like Redondo Beach and Hermosa and Manhattan, but we also have Inglewood. We have Torrance. We have Carson, industrial cities that have folks that live right over the fence line from refineries and from other toxic operations. We want to help those cities, and there's funding available from our state to do so in programs like this. Next slide, please. Just real quick, these are the 14 cities that we have targeted and have tried to work with for the last 3 years, and all of these cities agreed to participate in the feasibility study that the county did. And you can see the big dogs, if you will, in this program are Torrance and Carson with the most energy in the group. And then on our next slide, we'll show you where we're at. Well, I'll let Gary do that. Since Gary wasn't here in our last presentation, I won't steal his thunder. Gary Gero is our county's first ever Chief Sustainability Officer. And I want to, at this point, congratulate him because you may or may not know, ladies and gentlemen, that today our Board of Supervisors at LA County passed a motion 5-0 to fund a CCA program for our county. And they'll be starting with the unincorporated areas and then inviting cities, they already have, to join. So regardless of what we decide here tonight, the County of Los Angeles is moving forward with a community choice program across all 5 districts. Next slide, please. So here's our progress, and again, Ted did a good job of showing what we've been up to. But our more recent progress is last year around Thanksgiving, we delivered our draft JPA document to your city and our other target cities. And that document is a draft that's designed to spur discussion. It's a first draft that we hope cities will respond to, yay or nay, and add their own input. We held a workshop on that JPA draft, and I know that 2 of your staff members were there asking questions and participating. And then we've been going city by city now to ask cities, as we are here tonight, to receive and file our draft JPA and our business plan, and to have your staff review it, analyze it, and come back to you with recommendations as to its merits, and to compare it with your option for joining the county program. We have an embarrassment of riches here right now. You have your choice between a great county program, a great program that we're pushing forward, and even other options on the table beyond that. So we've gone city by city. On Valentine's Day, we were at Santa Monica, where they voted unanimously to pass that resolution and study the plan. We were in West Hollywood the following week. We were here on the 21st. We were in Torrance on April 4th, where they voted 6-1 to receive and file our plan and to analyze, review it, and come back with recommendations. Next Monday night, we'll be in the city of Malibu. We were at Carson Subcommittee this week, where we believe that they are now strongly leaning toward viewing our plan as well. Next slide, please. So what are your options with us? We're asking you to form a JPA with your neighbors here in the South Bay, as well as West Side cities that want to work with us. And we want to have that joint powers authority, that JPA, run this CCA. We'd like each of the participating cities to have a seat on the board, and we think a board of 14 to 20 cities is about just the right mix. Yesterday we read an article in the LA Times about the problems that our county is having with the new homeless panel, where they have 50 members, and they're kind of hamstrung. They can't make any decisions. They can't move forward because that's kind of an unmanageable number to have on a board. So we're trying to avoid that, have a very locally based JPA board with members from each of our participating cities. So if you choose to form that board, one of the first steps in a CCA would be for us to issue a request for proposals and qualifications for the people that are going to do the power procurement and the data management and the back office services. Unfortunately, this is an exploding industry in California, and our options today for vendors that we can choose to do that work are prodigious compared to what they were 5-6 years ago when other CCAs were just launching. We want our board to obviously determine and approve all goals and objectives of the program. That's how you know where you're headed. We want to specifically pursue an advanced CCA model, and that's one that promotes these distributed energy resources locally. And when we're talking about those resources, we're talking about production of renewable energy. We're talking about the storage of that energy. We're talking about the CCA's ability to do remarkable things in energy efficiency far beyond what the utility has been able to do. We're talking about demand response, and then electric cars are going to play a big role in this CCA because we're going to use those batteries in those cars to store energy, and we're going to shift the time when we charge those cars from late at night, when we're currently doing it at the cheapest rates, to the middle of the day, when right now, ladies and gentlemen, California produces so much solar that we're dumping some of it and we're not using it on the grid. The prices recently in some auctions dropped to zero for solar because it's so prodigious. Finally, we want your board to hire an experienced executive director to run this power authority based on the goals and objectives that the board sets for that ED. And we definitely want to collaborate with the county's program. They've launched a program today that encompasses all of the unincorporated areas. We see South Bay Clean Power working with the LACE program, as well as a program in Long Beach and a potential program on the east side, another program in the San Gabriel Valley. We have 82 eligible cities in this county, and we can form 4 or 5 regional CCAs that can all collaborate together. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through the top 10 reasons. We've gone through these before, but I'll say this about our program. We believe that local is the name of the game in community choice aggregation. Community is the real key here, and our program is a grassroots program that started with individuals like myself in Manhattan Beach. We then went to Hermosa Beach, where then city manager asked us to reach out to other cities and see if they were interested in participating in a feasibility study. We have built a grassroots working group with representatives from all the cities. We have representatives from the environmental groups. We have representatives from community groups. We've had electeds and staff members on there. We're your local grassroots choice. And we've been at it for 3 years, so we just had our 3-year anniversary. Next slide, please. So what's next on our timeline? We're asking your city and the other cities that have yet to pass this resolution to do so and study our plan and give it a fair hearing, and then let your city know if it's right for them. We'd like you to engage in that review, and upon completion, if you find our plan worthy, we'd like you to pass the JPA and pass the resolution that your city would need to join the other cities and form a South Bay Clean Power CCA. By the way, that's a working title. We assume that the Board of Directors will choose the name for this program based on what the board wants to call it. And then finally, we see customers starting to be enrolled in quarter number 2. And that should say 2018. That is not. We won't be enrolling anybody in the second quarter this year.
Very ambitious.
Yes. Next slide, please. So those are your staff's recommendations. We certainly embrace those, and I have to say we've been working with staff here since 2014. They have been remarkable. They have been bent over backwards to accommodate our initiative. They've asked some of the smartest questions of any city, and we appreciate Ted and Rob and everyone else in the city's time and help on this program.
So with that, Your Honor, I'd like to invite Gary from
Thank you very much.
Los Angeles County to also come and speak on what's transpired at their side.
Great. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And thanks to Joe for all the work that he's done and for bringing this program to everyone's attention. He's done a great job. I think it is important to focus on goals and benefits. We certainly in the County of Los Angeles have done that. We've been working on this program now for a little over 3 years. And the key things for us really go to the basic legislation. This is a program about providing consumers with an option, a choice. That's the choice and community choice aggregation. Here, you can either stay with the utility that you currently have, or you can go with the new utility that's created. But providing that level of option provides actually a benefit in an economic sense, that there is competition, and with competition, better rates. And I think the other piece is the local control. And I think this is particularly important. Today, rates are set by the PUC up in San Francisco. Under a community choice aggregation program, under a JPA that's created, it's actually the elected officials sitting on the board of the Joint Powers Authority that sets the rates for the communities. And I think that really does bring things to a local level. The others are really, and these are things that we talked about with the Board of Supervisors today, is providing lower cost energy than the Southern California Edison can provide. And we actually, with our business plan, our feasibility study that was conducted last year, showed the indicative rates of about 5% lower than what Southern California Edison is providing. That was a year ago, so we asked our consultant in leading up to today's Board of Supervisors meeting to go back and look at current market conditions and project out what rates might look like today, and do that over a long term. How would we know it could be economically viable in the short term. Would it be economically viable 20 years from now, and how can you project? And going through that analysis continues to show that we can provide rates of up to 5% lower than Southern California Edison over the long term and make an economically viable program. And I think that's an important component of the program. Joe has certainly pointed out the other great benefits and goals. We want to have as much renewable energy as possible. We want to have it as local as possible. We want to build that out. Those are consistent goals we want at economic development. So as I indicated, last year the board did, last year we did do this feasibility study that was presented to the Board of Supervisors, and the recommendation, quite frankly, from the staff a year ago was we should go do this. This makes economic sense. This is good for our businesses and customers. Move forward. And the board said we love the idea, but we want to do this together with cities throughout the region. We don't want to just go it alone as the county. We actually want a regional program. We think there are regional benefits. And when you actually can enroll as many customers as possible, that means you could spread administrative costs over a larger pool of ratepayers and reduce those costs for each individual. And so that was a key goal. And they gave my office, I'm in the Chief Executive Office, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer, the job of going out and talking with cities and developing a joint powers agreement, negotiating an agreement with cities. And staff from cities all around the region, we had almost 60 cities at one point in the room talking about the joint powers agreement. And that agreement was really every 2 weeks sitting down, talking through the issues. How would we create this agency? What are the key goals? What are the key important elements? And I don't want to focus on all of it, but I will talk about the voting because I think the governance is important. I think cities were very concerned that the county is a big entity and didn't want to have the county have outsized influence. And in fact, when the Board of Supervisors gave me the direction last year, they said, go out and create a fair and equitable representation for cities. We want to make sure this works for everybody. And so the board structure that was created is a one-member, one-vote structure. The city of Redondo Beach and the county would each have one member on that board, and you would have a one vote. There were options laid out for the use of a weighted vote, but only in limited circumstances and with some restrictions. So it really was meant to be a one-member, one-vote board. And as we looked at the examples from Northern California where all those CCAs are existing, they have a similar structure. They have not yet once ever had to call for a weighted vote. Things are done on a one-vote, one-member basis or one-member, one-vote basis. So I think that's important to remember and recognize that we really are looking to work together in partnership with cities. The action today did several things. One, the Board of Supervisors approved the JPA document that was negotiated among the cities. So that is now the document that we're circulating to cities, and we sent it out earlier tonight to your city manager and some of your staff to say, here is the document. We adopted the enabling ordinance that legally allows us to move forward with creating the CCA. The board approved $10 million in initial funding. So the county has said, we will pick up all of the initial costs to start the program. That $10 million is $2 million in administrative costs. That's the power procurement and the back office, all the things that Joe just mentioned, as well as $8 million to go out and actually buy power for the program. So we are now moving forward. We are hiring an interim executive director to start the program running. That interim executive director is the 16-year executive director of the Southern California Public Power Authority, a JPA of municipal utilities in Southern California, knows how to operate a JPA, knows a lot about the public power sector. So I'll just conclude with sort of our next steps. We are actively out talking to cities, just as we are here tonight, and again, appreciate the opportunity to come to say we'd love for you to join us, evaluate your options. I think you'll find that if you're interested in low rates, renewable energy, distributed energy, economic development, that can be achieved in a single structure. The structure we have provides you with a lot of flexibility. You can come in at any one of the tiers. We've opened essentially what we're calling an open enrollment period. We're used to open enrollment periods in government, of course, and said cities that join us between now and essentially the end of the year, all of the initial costs are covered through the county's initial funding, and the program will roll out. We're actually looking to start delivering electricity in January of this year. We're going to start delivering electricity only at county facilities. There's about 2,000 of them in the unincorporated area. And the reason for that is we saw that there were serious billing issues when Lancaster launched their program a year ago. And we don't want to subject our customers to bad bills. We've seen utilities not roll out billing systems very well in the past, so we want to make sure that we'll be the guinea pig. We'll take the bad bills if they come. We'll fix the billing system over that 6-month period and then start rolling out to customers. So, again, we appreciate the time tonight. Happy to answer any questions you may have, and encourage you to adopt the resolution tonight.
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
Could you tell us your name again first? I'm sorry.
I'm Gary Gero, thank you.
Gary Gero. Thank you for coming, Gary. Couple questions. What is, one of the problems with these big regional agencies, it's great, one vote, one member, that's fantastic. But the big problem we've had with a lot of different, especially county agencies, is getting a quorum and being able to, execute business. And I could see that being a problem in the future. Is there something in your bylaws that allows for business to get conducted without maybe having a quorum, or not having, you define a quorum in such a way that you can still conduct business without going long periods of time?
What we have done in actually in the JPA document, the bylaws have yet to be written, and that's the next thing that we're doing. But the JPA actually says that you may participate electronically, so that we could have people not having to come from Palmdale and Claremont and Long Beach to some central location, so the electronic participation to ease that. We've also said that all of the voting is a majority of the members present, not of the entire membership. Also built into the JPA is a recognition that a large board could be created, and it specifically says, one, there's an executive committee that was created, and so hopefully work can get done at the executive committee level and the finance committee level. But two, there's specific language that says if it's ever determined that the board is too big to be effective, that the JPA, the board itself, has the ability to streamline the governance structure in partnership with the executive director and in consultation as to what that streamlining might look like.
Okay, so the bylaws haven't been written yet, ultimately.
The bylaws are now being written.
Now being written. Okay, that's interesting. So you have an open enrollment to the end of the year. End of the year comes and you haven't enrolled yet. I assume you could still enroll.
That's right. So the JPA document, again, says that you can enter at any time. What it says is, again, that we'll cover the initial costs for anybody who does come in this first period. If you come in next year and we have to go out and procure additional power on your behalf because you're a new entrant that we hadn't previously anticipated, the JPA allows us to say you may need to cover those initial costs yourself.
Maybe this is in the yet-to-be-finalized bylaws, but what is the exit strategy or exit opportunity for someone who got in it and now wants to get out?
Again, that is in the JPA document. That's a question that we get frequently. It specifically says you can give a 180-day notice that you want to leave the JPA, the agency itself. And in that time, the agency will work to shed itself of any contracts or to sell any power it may have procured on your behalf. And if there are any remaining costs, it's kind of a hold harmless clause. We don't want the remaining members, if Redondo Beach is a remaining member, you don't want to be paying for some city that has left. But it will essentially say whatever that marginal difference is between what we procured the power and what we sold it at, and maybe we made a profit on selling it, then there's no cost. But it basically says that there's a hold harmless clause, and we'll do what we can to shed ourselves of those obligations that we undertook on your behalf when you joined. And I would say that you actually, as a member of the board, will have approved those contracts in the first place. So you may be seeking to shed contracts that you initially approved.
Okay, well, let me take a few questions from the council. Council Member MD.
Okay, so financial risk. I thought I remember reading that there was a lawsuit in which, even though the JPA, according to the South Bay Clean Power, they said that the JPA will be liable for repayment, not the local government. But I thought, and maybe Mr. Webb would actually know this, there was a lawsuit that said that wasn't true, that when somebody sued, they ended up the city was liable. Do you know anything about that? Or have to go
I'm not certain if this is the lawsuit you're talking about, but I believe there is currently a claim by CalPERS against the JPA that was set up by a number of member cities, and the employees of that JPA, which is now defunct, were made members of CalPERS. And so CalPERS is going after the member cities for the monies that are due to CalPERS for the underfunded retirement.
That's what it was. And so how do we, how have you fixed it so that wouldn't happen to us?
Well, I think this is a test case, right? It hasn't been decided. There has been long-standing history that there is a firewall between the JPA and the member agencies. This case is testing that.
Okay. And then only a 5% reduction in costs for residents, that doesn't seem like a lot.
I guess that depends on where you stand. If you're a business and your electricity bill is $50,000 a month, that probably adds up.
Okay, and then so the whole point of this is to be able to get new renewable resources, right? And so we're kind of a built-out city, and so you mentioned that it would be to provide more solar in our area versus buying it somewhere else like Lancaster or somewhere like that. So does the CCA pay for solar on our city properties, or what kind of a program would that be, or do we have to then invest in the solar?
No, the CCA would actually be the one developing those projects. So the JPA would come together and say, what is our strategic plan for how many new resources do we need and where and what's the best place, and probably put out RFPs and those kinds of things to solicit proposals on who can develop power in what locations, and we would evaluate those based on cost and effectiveness.
Okay, so, but the CCA would pay that, we wouldn't have to pay
That's
that
right.
to that. Okay. And then I'm hearing a bit of a conflict in that Joe said that to make the JPA work right, that he thought 14 to 20 cities were the right mix, but you're saying there's going to be 60 cities in yours, and so it's just a difference of opinion on that?
Yeah, I don't know how many cities, quite honestly, are going to join our JPA. We didn't make it as an obligation to participate in the negotiations that you commit to our program. 60 cities have been actively or in some capacity talking to us about joining, but we don't know what the size of the ultimate JPA is. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be in the 15 to 20 in this first 6-month open enrollment period. Could be 20, 25, 30. It's sort of anybody's guess because, again, we haven't asked for commitments.
And what about the CCAs I keep hearing about that have lost millions of dollars? And what have you put into your JPA that would protect you from that?
Well, again, I think as long as that firewall between the JPA and the member agencies holds, then I don't think any of the members would be liable. The extent to which JPAs that have formed and are operating are losing money is kind of a matter, I think, of some people's opinion, but the fact is that all of them are operating in the black and have been since they're, and have been, excuse me, I'm talking, have been since their inception.
All right, that's all for now.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, one of the questions I have is for
Hey, let's keep the audience comments down. I mean, everybody's going to get a chance to speak here.
for those consumers that are willing to participate. Is it an automatic enrollment? Is it an opt-in? How does it work for each of your CCAs?
Under the state law, in order to actually make the CCAs effective from the outset, all customers are automatically enrolled in the CCA. If they had to go out and try to pick up customers, they didn't think it would ever actually get off the ground. But there are at least 2 public notices required in advance, 60 days in advance, 30 days in advance to all customers saying this is happening, you have the ability to opt out. And then even after the program is launched, there's 2 additional public notices that are required saying this has launched. If you don't want to be part of the CCA, you can leave at any time at no cost.
And that's a letter in the mail, or is it various ways of reaching consumers?
So the legal requirement is actually a postcard in the mail, but we work through Southern California Edison so that it would be in your bill as well as a bill stuffer, and if you get electronic bills, like most people do these days, it would be in your email or a special email.
Because I would imagine the average person that you see on the street has no idea what a CCA is.
That's right.
And in fact, I didn't know until a month or 2 ago. So, I would think it would take some education on the part of your organization.
And what we've seen in all of the ones that exist to date is that in addition to the minimal required public notices that are in the state law, all of those CCAs have actually spent money putting out public information campaigns. If you go, San Francisco launched recently. If you've been in San Francisco recently, you'll see bus posters and all kinds of things saying, did you know that there's San Francisco Clean Energy now?
So that actually leads to my next question. You have a decent relationship with Southern California Edison versus PG&E, which seems to be fighting this?
That's right. Southern California Edison, and we meet with them about every 2 weeks at this point as we're talking through the billing and transition issues. Southern California Edison, first of all, is not allowed to make a profit to charge on the power procurement charges. So for them, that's a straight pass-through. They don't own any generating assets.
Right.
So what you're doing essentially is taking away what is a relatively complicated function, which is buying power and matching it up to your load. And they said, if you want to take that on, that's fine by us. They've been very helpful. They've been a partner.
Okay. And approximately, by your calculations, if the county participates in this over the next couple of years, what do you anticipate the savings projected, just a ballpark estimate by the county, and maybe by the city, if we have any estimates as well, too, if the city decides to join?
Right. So you can imagine our electricity bill is fairly large. It's about $16 million annually.
Okay.
So if we save 5% on that, you can do the calculation. That's a pretty good chunk. Although I will say the Board of Supervisors has said for county facilities, what they want, and this was in today's motion, they want as much renewable power at county facilities so that we're actually have an equivalent rate of what the current Edison is. So we're not going to get a discount. We're just going to get a lot of renewables. And that's good for me as the Chief Sustainability Officer because I have to help us achieve our climate goals.
Right.
What our business plan, the feasibility analysis assessed on a county-wide basis, if all the cities participated, was about a $20 million of savings to consumers, business and residential customers annually, and that obviously goes back into the economy and helps in terms of reinvestment or new consumer spending.
Okay. And then another question I have is related to staff resources as well as startup. So it sounds like you're funding cities to join this. Mr. Galliani in the South Bay Clean Power is advocating the Humboldt model, correct?
That's right.
So the Humboldt model requires more of a wait and see who joins versus allocating the dollars from the municipalities. So there's a little bit more risk at the beginning of this versus your project, which is versus your CCA, which actually has less risk, probably less staff time. Would that be accurate?
There would be no staff time from any of the cities other than the staff time it takes to staff the individual who serves on the board. In fact, there's no staff time from the county. Once we get through this initial phase where the county is providing the startup services, we anticipate all of that shifting to the JPA to actually operate under their own staff.
Okay, Mr. Galliani, I don't know if you can clarify as well, too, in terms of staff time and any type of resources needed from the city to join something like this.
I think at this point, the staff time that is on the table that we're talking about is for the evaluation and analyzation of the plan and coming back to you with recommendations. Okay. We don't anticipate that there would be any more staff time in a South Bay Clean Power program than there would be in an LA County program.
Okay, great. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Barbie.
Thank you, Councilman Lowenstein. You brought up some of the issues I had. I do have a couple of questions, and bear with me and correct me if I've understood part of your planning correctly. So if we buy long-term contracts and for power, and these costs go up, and now we have people that opt out of the CCA, are we as a city stuck paying out of our general fund what we've bought?
No. So if individuals opt out, not at all. And in fact, we're going to have a mix of contracts. We'll have a portfolio. So there'll be potentially some long-term, maybe 10, 15-year contracts, some 5, some 1, some 6-month, and then there'll be a lot of kind of day-to-day spot market purchases just to true up against the load curve. But no, any member city or is not responsible, whether it's an individual resident or even, and I had this question in Torrance, if say the refinery left, would Torrance, the city of Torrance, be responsible for the load that Torrance refineries have? And absolutely not. They are not.
Another question for you regarding the cities that were listed. You mentioned Hermosa, Manhattan, Torrance, Carson, Santa Monica. How many of these have actually committed? Because I had the ability to check with 2 of them today that had not committed.
And no city has committed.
No
we
city
have
has
not
committed.
asked any city to commit. I don't believe any city is committed to the county program yet.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. I wanted to double check because I didn't want it to be misleading. I wanted to double check. Thank you. Does Southern California Edison also have a renewable energy program that is available as an option or not?
They do, and that's a relatively recent development. So I think as a result of the pressure they'd seen from the CCA formation, they now offer a 50% renewable and 100% renewable rate. And we actually, as I indicated when we updated our rates analysis, we looked at what we could charge for that vis-a-vis what Edison is charging for those same rates, and there you see significant discounts, something on the order of 15 or 20% vis-a-vis the Edison rate for the same power.
And let me add to that, too, that Edison caps that program, so it's not available to every single person that would want to be part of it. They have a threshold beyond which they're not planning on going above.
Thank you for clearing that up. I wanted to make that up. Another question for you. I was forwarded some information today in anticipation of it being on the agenda item regarding Lancaster and the savings for residential users of the power. And it turned out that for these customers, their savings was only $1 a month, except for the care customers that were subsidized, where they were saving about $6 a month, a little bit more. do we have any kind of valid financial projections related, I'm looking for a return on investment for what is being put forth, or is what you're proposing is that our city staff has to do this work to come up with these financial projections?
Well, I'll start by saying that we completely accept the county's financial projections, and since the power load size...
The 5% you mentioned,
yes,
correct? Okay.
yes, and the ability to deliver 50% renewable energy at that rate. That's important because right now Southern California is giving us 28% renewable energy, and when Gary is comparing the 50% rate, it's to that 28%. So that's a significant benefit for cities.
Trying to see if I have one more question for you. Actually, my next question wasn't necessarily to you guys, but was to staff. I'm a huge proponent of renewable energy and clean power and so forth, but as I've often said, I prefer to not speak in glittering generalities, but in things that I can execute. And one of the things that I'm concerned about very locally is the fee that we charge for residential customers that decide to use solar panels. I would love to be able to help those customers that choose on their own to use renewable energy to not be, is Aaron Jones here? Or maybe Ted would know, I'm not sure. Anyhow, if we don't have the answer today, that's something that I would be interested in, because again, it affects us here locally, and it's something that can help the individual customers. So I just wanted to bring that up.
And I will say this, that the board has the option of instituting programs and elements of a CCA to help customers like that. So in Marin, they pay customers extra who produce more solar than they use. And last year, they gave out over $1 million in checks to businesses, residents, schools, and cities.
But as a city, I would like to encourage the individual homeowners to be able to do this instead of penalizing them with extra fees. But that's not related to your CCA, of course. This was just along creating the incentive for clean power and renewable energy within my city. Thank you.
Let me ask a question. You know, you talk a lot about 100% renewable. What if you go to 120%? I guess that's what you're talking about. Then you can sell it back to the CCA or to Southern California Edison?
The CCA, yeah. In fact, what Mr. Galliani is referring to is in Marin, under the Edison program, you bank those credits. If you do 120, then you've got 20% credit for the future year. And you can always keep it in the bank, but you can never actually get it returned to you. And if you leave the Edison territory, it goes away. Mm-hmm. Under the Marin program, and I think this is a model that we were likely to follow, is at the end of each year, if you have overproduced, they send you a check, and that check is actually at the retail rate that you pay for electricity. So they're not paying you at some discount like some of the programs, like a feed-in tariff might, which I think is capped at 8 cents or something. They're paying at the retail rate.
So if you could somehow produce more energy than you use, you could actually make money on this deal.
Well, I was at a building today in Commerce, which is a net zero plus energy building. It actually deliberately produces more energy than it uses and puts that back into the grid. That's the IBEW's training center out in Commerce.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, nice to meet you finally, Mr. Gero.
Nice to meet you.
So, I haven't been following the county as much in the past couple months, and I apologize for not making some of the meetings. But with the plan now, as it's looking for you guys, when you offer it to cities, is there the option for the municipality to join specifically as a municipality first before allowing the residential and or the business opt-in, or kind of like the way you're going into the unincorporated areas and your own county buildings first as like a test scenario?
Sure. There is that, although there is a sort of a time limit on that. We haven't set that time limit, but we would not want member cities participating only a little bit, but having a full vote. We would want them ultimately to have all of their customers in.
And then, you know, one of Joe's goals, right, is that as the CCA becomes profitable, much like Marin and the others up north, you have the option to, with any potential revenues that you're generating, to either offer further rebates to your residents, businesses, whoever's buying in, or to Councilwoman Barbie's point, to offer rebates in terms of incentives, you know, to maybe put solar or, you know, do your own
That's
you're
right.
on
And in
nanogrid
fact,
or microgrid.
all of those things are on the table. What we have said is that those are policy decisions left to the board of directors of the JPA once formed. Those are all things I think we're interested in and want to do. But we are not saying these are the things, certainly the county is not dictating in any terms what the programs or policies are. We're setting up the governance and letting the governance drive the policy.
Got it. Will the 5 supervisors be members of the board as well as the independent cities, or will the county just have one seat at the table?
Just have one supervisor.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for this moment.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you both for the information. It's great to hear that the county is going to pick up all the startup costs for that CCA. Mr. Galliani, could you describe how the startup costs for the South Bay Clean Power version would occur?
Certainly, and it's called At Risk, and there are companies that know that this is a very viable project. Thanks to the county's feasibility study, they know what the numbers are. We know how few people opt out. So at the Humboldt County model, the folks that are going to do the power procurement or are going to bid on it, as well as the data management and other back office services, put up the initial money the same way the county is doing. In the Humboldt model, they had each of the bidding companies agreed to a 5-year payback period, and they work at risk because they don't get paid back if the program doesn't launch. So the cities are not asked to contribute any money whatsoever, and they suffer, if at all, from the revenue stream that goes to pay back the folks that put the money up front, in much the same way that the $5 million loan from the county will be paid back from revenue from the program as well. So there's similar models in that sense. We believe that the expenses associated with the at-risk model are lower than the expenses when you use a loan to fund the program.
Right, so just so I'm clear, so that if a city like Redondo Beach were to participate, there's no startup costs that we would have to incur from our general plan to get it going?
That's correct. That's what our business plan lays out right now.
So maybe this is a question for either of you. So we haven't really talked about energy storage much. We've talked a little bit about the build-out of the infrastructure. Could you elaborate on what would be required and what would be some goals for storage of that energy?
Sure, I can start, and Joe can fill in. Under the state regulation, there's a requirement that 1% of load be kept in storage. So we would have at least that as a minimum to meet state regulatory requirements. I think if we're really looking at a lot of renewable energy, you have to have storage in order to meet the demand curves. And so storage would be a significant part of the program.
I couldn't agree more. And when we talk storage, it's important to understand that we all know about battery storage. But battery storage is just a small part of how we store energy in utility scale. So there is pump storage. There's a solar plant in Spain that is storing energy using molten salt, which they heat to 1,000 degrees, and it stays hot all night, and then it drives steam turbines that generate electricity so that they're actually producing solar electricity in Spain 24/7. There's a wide variety of methods through which we can store the energy, and we need to. There's a thing called the duck curve, which we won't go into the details of, but in the middle of the day, when the solar starts to drop off, we need storage to keep the amount of energy going that this state and all of our cities need.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, we don't have any more lights. Thank you, Aaron, Joe, very much.
Thanks.